Okay, so I think we are live.
All right.
Great. Yeah, so good evening, everybody, and good evening to Jonathan Briggs. My name is Kyle Ashley, and I am one of the co-editors of Fathering Stories, Volume 1, which is a new book that's coming out through Fathering Together. And tonight I have the distinct honor and privilege to be talking with Jonathan Briggs, who is an author of one of the chapters in Fathering Stories. And the chapter that you wrote, Jonathan, is called Family Reunion, and I actually had the opportunity to work with you and do some editing and revisions to the piece. And so I'm really excited to talk to you more tonight about the piece because, of course, I got to read it, but I know that there's always a little bit more to the story, right? And so hopefully we'll get a chance to dive into that through our conversation. I want to welcome everybody in the Fathering Together Facebook communities to the conversation. If you have questions for Jonathan or comments that you'd like to add, please feel free to shoot them into the chat box, and we will do our best to answer those questions as we continue on with our conversation. So without further ado, I would love to hand over the spotlight to Jonathan Briggs. Jonathan, could you maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to writing this chapter for Fathering Stories?
Sure. Happy to do so, Kyle. So I'm Jonathan Briggs. I'm actually a former journalist turned dad blogger. I started a blog called Fatherhood at 40 back in 2017. I actually launched it on Father's Day. And the idea was that there are more men who are becoming fathers at the age of 40. There's been a lot of census data that's been analyzed by academics and professors. And, there's something different about becoming a dad relatively later in life compared to, let's say, if you were in your 20s or 30s. And so about 6 weeks before my 40th birthday, I became a first-time dad. It just so happens that my father became a dad also in his 40s. And so I just thought there was something sort of clandestine about fatherhood at 40, and I launched the blog. I used to say that my tagline was I heart wingtip shoes and statement socks, because I do love a good statement sock. But I think now it's really just about sharing my journey in the hope of connecting with other dads who are probably a little bit older and wiser.
I love that. Yeah, I'm sure that there are unique challenges as well as some really cool opportunities that probably come along with being a dad a little bit later on in life. And so I'm sure there's a community out there, folks who want to talk about that. And, I'm sure that you've probably found all of that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you have, I've met some dads who become fathers, in their 20s and 30s, and then maybe had another child later in life. Or became a stepdad or a father figure to, stepchild or a son or someone in the community. And so I do think you
Mm.
have more to pass on when you're older. You know who you are, and oftentimes you have more resources, and I don't mean just financial, but life experience is very valuable. And the
Mm-hmm.
lessons that you've learned through either tough circumstances or just because you've had to mature and endure, those are things that are valuable to pass on to the younger generation. So it's really been nice to talk to other dads about where they are in the journey. There's different stages, I would say, of fatherhood.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things I really love about the Fathering Together community is that you really get a sense for all the different stages of fatherhood. You see the posts out there from dads who are,
Right.
brand new dads. They're just coming from the birthing room. They're so excited, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And then you see these posts of dads whose daughters are graduating from high school or graduating from college or having successful careers, and it's just it's amazing to see. And as a relatively new father, so my daughter's not quite 2 years old, to see those posts from dads who are a little bit older and whose daughters are just doing amazing things or who are going through some challenges and struggles, gives me a lot of perspective because it just is a good reminder that as much as I feel like my life is just so wrapped up in being a dad now, it's going to change and evolve and it's different, and I'm going to grow older and wiser and have some different perspectives as I get older too. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's just
absolutely,
it's,
absolutely. So in terms of why I wrote the piece, so I originally wrote the piece actually, I think it was a couple weeks after I went to my first family reunion on my dad's side of the family. And the reason that's significant is because I actually did not grow up with my dad. I actually met him for the first time when I was 6 years old. And then I later
mm,
reconnected with him 25 years later. So I had this stretch
wow.
of my life, basically through, I think I was about what in my 30s. I was like 34
Mm,
when I reconnected with my dad, and so meeting his family, it was all new, and I learned all of this history about him and about therefore my own family roots or family tree that I
mm,
never knew about. So the first thing they did when I connected with his sister and so my aunts and cousins and all these people I'd never met before, they said, "Oh, you got to come to the family reunion. It's like this big deal, the Jones Powell family
mm,
reunion." And so
yeah.
I went. Actually, the first time I couldn't make it, but the second invitation I was able to make it, and so
Mm,
um, yeah, that I felt the need to document that so that
yeah.
as my daughter wasn't quite two at that time. Um, she can look back and read what it was like from her dad's eyes of being at the reunion and also learn about the family history
Hmm.
because I wove in a lot of some of our family characters and character traits.
Yeah, absolutely. So walking into that family reunion for the first time, you don't get all this background in the chapter that you wrote.
Right.
What was that like for you? Kind of never having met these people and sort of walking in and introducing yourself, and then I'm assuming your daughter's with you as well, and so you're also probably managing her as a toddler, and because like I said, I'm right in that stage now, and I know how much of a handful my daughter is to do
Yeah,
that anytime, but let
absolutely.
alone, yeah. So what was that like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had the advantage of one of the professional defects about being a journalist is that you tend to interview people and research in advance. So I had already written a piece um, that was all about how I met my dad and actually got published in the paper I used to work for, the Chicago Tribune. And I had sort
Oh
of
wow.
behind the scenes, I had mapped out the family tree, who was related to who, and I had, set my sights on writing a book for my own, not for publishing, but just for my own, almost like a family narrative that I could pass on. And so by the time I got to the family reunion, I had already spoken with my aunt Linda quite a bit. And
Mm,
Linda is sort of like the family historian, along with her brother, so I learned a lot from them. I had actually flown to Sacramento to meet Linda's brother, so my uncle. His name is Jim Powell as well, and he shared a lot of photos and things with me. So I feel like I had a little bit of a ace up my sleeve because I walked into the family reunion kind of knowing the Jones side, the Powell side, who the characters were. My cousin Dana, I kind of knew who they were. I think for
mm,
me, the challenge was that there were some new people I hadn't met. And there was just a lot of um, talking to be had, right? Because by the time they met me, before they met me, I should say, they had read the piece that was published in the newspaper. So they had a lot of
I see.
questions. They're
I
like,
see.
you're Edward Briggs' son, you're Eddie's son, that piece you
Mm,
wrote, so it um, putting things on down on paper helped them get to know me before they had even met me.
I see. see. I see. And one of the things that you talk about in the chapter is sort of attending this family reunion, being important for you, obviously, and connecting to your family, but also having your daughter there and connecting her to this family is a part of sort of leaving a legacy and connecting her to that legacy. Yeah, talk more about that because I think probably that theme of legacy is really important for a lot of dads.
Yeah, it's interesting. So she, was so young, it probably didn't register in terms of the words or the particular people and settings. I thought, although I think she probably connected more to my Aunt Linda, just because
Mm,
there was this little one of those kind of foldable carts, like pull wagon carts that my daughter she likes to help. So they
hmm.
were using that cart to move the food and meat around from the barbecue and to the picnic table, and she wanted to be in charge of the cart. So she met a lot of
Uh,
people because they needed the cart, and she wanted to help pull it or move it and all of that. I think more than
yeah.
anything, it's the energy and the spirit of the family reunion. Sort of being around people that are kind of like your tribe. They know you, they love you, they, have a lot to share with you. They're coming from different places in the world, I mean, in the country. And I think there's just more of a kinship factor that you don't get when you are maybe a nuclear family and it's just like in my case, me and my wife and my daughter, and our family is very spread out because she's from
Mm,
Chicago. I'm from California, Los Angeles, California. So our family is all over the place. So when you
mm,
have these events that bring people together, there's really more the energy behind it and the documentation of it is really important. So the
mm,
photos and the videos that we took and the placemat that I talk about in the story that has my
hmm.
fraternal grandmother Mamie Jones Powell. She was in the center of that placemat. Her photo with her pearls, where she always wore her pearls. She was, the matriarch featured on this placemat. So those touch points create memories that you can touch and feel and pass on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find myself doing that sort of thing a lot as well. Whenever I go somewhere with my daughter or we experience something that I think is really important, like you said, at this point, she's too young to really remember the details. So I find myself wanting to write things down so that later on I can remember them and she can reread it herself or I can just retell her the story. But yeah, I think that is a really important part of legacy. Um, so you know, legacy aside and the chapter aside, um, what's your favorite thing about fatherhood? What's your favorite thing about being a dad?
Oh, wow. I knew this question was coming. It's always a lot to say about it. I think the best thing about fatherhood is what it teaches you about yourself. So yes, you are, raising your child, you are learning as you go, right? Because you're only as old in your fatherhood journey as their age reflects. So I'm 5.5 years in, actually more than 5.5 years in. And, I've grown as a dad in terms of my level of patience and tuning into who my daughter, innately is and, you know, being intentional about I expose her to and what I tell her and looking at my behaviors. I know she models that. So there's just a lot of, I would say the best thing is probably nurturing a young life, really watching this child become a person. Um,
Mm,
and then also just really, I think there's a more of an appreciation to kind of slow down and focus on what's
mm,
important. So I think being more present about uh, what is valuable to you and meaningful to you, because your priorities completely change. You know, um, I used to work all the time. I still work quite a bit, but I've now changed my work so that it allows me to be the kind of dad that I want to be. So I have a job that's 10 minutes from my house. Before, my last job was like an hour from my house, and I can pick my
mm,
daughter up from daycare. I can be present with her. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is probably, maybe that's for me, the biggest gift of fatherhood is just the ability to be present, and to witness the blossoming of this life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have experienced much of that as well, and I'm a little bit earlier on in my fatherhood journey, but talking about presence and slowing down and just coming to terms with what matters in your life, right? I couldn't agree more. But actually, the chapter that I wrote for the book was about making the decision to step away from my career and become a stay-at-home dad.
Oh, I
And
haven't had a chance to read it yet. Okay.
yeah, yeah, it's exactly for all those reasons that you talked about. It's just there were a number of other factors going on in my life that led to the decision, but at the end of the day, it was just a matter of saying, hey, what do I actually want to do with my life, and what do I want to spend my time doing? And if I get to choose, I'm going to choose my daughter every time,
Right.
and I actually I call her my greatest teacher because I feel like she every day teaches me how to pay attention to what really matters. How to really
Yeah.
value the things in life that are important. Um, yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. Okay, so we talked about the good things. Now, what about the challenging things? Like what's hard about being a dad? Maybe connecting with some of those difficulties that all of us dads out there are experiencing.
What's hard about being a dad? So I think, really just the time pressure. So there's everybody has needs. Everybody, you know, time is finite, needs are infinite. And so you have to balance, um, just responding to all of these. You do have obligations. Those
Mm,
obligations are not going away. You're happy to do them, but you end up with a lot on your plate. So I think, there was just an article, I think it was in the New York Times not too long ago, about parental time pressure, which is actually a thing. It's been studied by academics. Um, and when I read that, I thought, man, somebody actually captured what I'm feeling. I feel like I just don't
mm,
have as much time as I used to, because that time is already accounted for before you have even spent it, right? It's like things you just
mm,
have to do. So I think that can wear on you over time, and it's just sort of like draining. And I
mm,
think about
mm,
all the technology we
mhm.
have compared to my parents and grandparents, and you still have this feel this pressure, even though I guess theoretically you should have more time because there's all these automation and technology things. But no, you're just more busy.
Mhm,
So I think it's,
mhm.
to me, that's been one of the challenges.
Yeah, and I think since the coronavirus, that's sort of been intensified for a lot of parents as well, right? I know for me, just being a stay-at-home dad, I can't go to the library anymore. There's a lot of things that we just can't go and do anymore that we used to get out of the house and go do. And so, in terms of that parental time pressure thing, it feels like there's more pressure on me in terms of time. But I can only imagine what it's like for parents who have kids who are in school or who have kind of different circumstances than my toddler does, right? As they get older, there are more things that they're involved
Wow.
in, and that time pressure, I'm sure, it just gets more and more.
Yeah, because your kids get older, right? They have a social life, they have extracurricular activities. My daughter started kindergarten, back in August. And so that was a whole new schedule, a whole new routine that my wife and I had to readjust. We're constantly adjusting our schedule around her development, around our careers, around our personal needs, our personal time. And you can feel very scheduled, and then if one little thing gets off in the schedule, there's like this ripple effect, this domino effect, and it's just like
Mm-hmm.
everything just goes to pot. So there's definitely a lot of, there's a lot of conversation about work-life balance, and I just don't think it's a balance. You juggle
Yeah,
constantly, and that's the
yeah.
reality, at least the reality that I'm experiencing so far.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, and I also think sort of the flip side of that positive that we were talking about, which was, presence and really being in the moment with your child, that's exactly what we're talking about, right? Because if you're in the moment with your child, then you're not in the moment doing other things. And you know, t- talking about research, there's been lots of research done on this idea of multitasking, right? It's actually not possible. You don't multitask. You just
Exactly.
quickly move from one. And I found that in parenting, and since I've become a dad, I have a much harder time switching from focusing on my daughter to like looking at email or looking at social media, for example. And she always wants to be doing what I'm doing. So if I pull out my phone, then she wants
Yeah,
to see my phone, and it becomes a whole thing. So I've actually found it's just better to put the technology away and just focus on her. But again, that means that I'm not doing the work and I'm not doing the other stuff that I was doing. So yeah, I agree. It sort of the benefits of being present as a parent, and all the great that comes from that also come with a little bit of having to distance yourself from some of these other responsibilities that maybe were important to you at one time or before you were a parent.
exactly, exactly. I call it the ruthless prioritization. Because what happens is because
Oh,
the time
that's
with my
good.
daughter is so important, the things that I have to do, I just rank them, like this is at the top, this is at the bottom, and this is just not going to get done. And that's okay.
Mm,
And, I mean, so you do end up having to make decisions. I think the benefit to parental time pressure is that you can cut out a lot of BS from your life, including
yeah.
relationships with family members who are not helpful, friends who
Hmm.
are don't understand what you're going through, work situations. It allows you to be very efficient. So there's definitely upsides.
Yep. Absolutely. And I think, once you have kids, the rest of the world kind of understands, like, okay, we'll give him a pass because he's
Right.
got a screaming toddler. We want to get it done, exactly. Okay, so thinking about the Fathering Together community, we talked a little bit about that already. What's been your experience with the Fathering Together community, and what are some of the benefits of that community for you?
It's interesting because I actually heard about the Fathering Together community through Dad 2.0. So I was at the Dad
Mm,
2.0 summit in DC, which was just in February. It feels like a lifetime ago because of the pandemic. But, there was a table there in a booth, and I remember getting invited, I want to say, through Chris from Dad of Divas. Um,
hmm.
and really got just, found it helpful because I thought there was like the Dads with Daughters group.
Yep,
Um, and then there's like now I think you guys just launched the Dad with Sons or Father Son.
yep,
But the Dads with Daughters, when I saw, I think it was like 100,000 people on Facebook, fathers on Facebook. And what I
yeah,
liked,
yeah.
what I enjoyed about it is that, especially after the death of Kobe Bryant and his daughter, you
Mm,
saw this massive dad girl, sort of upspring of emotion and feeling. And, the Fathering Together community was definitely a part of that.
hmm.
And there is just something different between father-daughter relationship compared to mother-daughter. It just is. And so I
Hmm.
appreciate that we celebrate that and we recognize that, because we are the first men in their lives that they know. And so I think it's important for us to, think about the significance of that as we raise them.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a daughter, and I think for me, part of what drew me to this group is just exactly what you're talking about. I think there's a special thing that happens when you're a dad with a daughter, and not that something special doesn't happen when you have a son. I'm sure it looks different.
True.
But yeah, no, I just think that, and the community around that, because it's also interesting, to kind of observe not only the guys in the group, but also the other dads that I know who have daughters, and just to see how they've changed as people. So I've got this really great friend from high school, and all throughout high school and college, he was kind of just he kind of was a smart aleck. He he kind of went along in life and bounced from one thing to the next. And then he got married, and then within a couple of years, he had a daughter. And it's like his whole life just turned a 180 in a matter of years. And now he's the most responsible, upstanding. He's just a totally different guy. And you see him with his daughter, and he's tender and he's kind, and it's just I think that fatherhood in general can have a significant impact on guys. But I think there's something really special about being a dad of a daughter. It really, at least again, speaking from my experience, it
Sure.
really can change things.
What's cool about the Facebook group too is I see dads will post pictures of, my
Mm.
daughter, just turned 2, or she turned 6, or she just graduated from high school or college, or she turned 21. You also hear stories of dads who are co-parenting, who might be struggling with
Mm-hmm.
how to make that relationship work, with the mother of their child. You see dads struggling with kids who have an illness, or a health condition or emergency, and asking
Mm-hmm.
for thoughts and prayers and positive energy. So I think that community, the social, emotional, spiritual support, especially for some dads are isolated and they don't really have a
Yeah.
community of other dads to talk to. They
Yep.
can't go to Dad 2.0, or they don't have a blog or whatever that is. They can just be on Facebook and connect with other dads. So I think that's something valuable, because I think as you get older, you tend to have less friends. You tend to have a
Mm.
smaller circle. Some of that could just be because of stages in life. Some of it could just be because you've outgrown people that may have been toxic to you.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it could just be because you're just busy, striving and raising your family and pursuing other interests. But we have to recognize that there's some dads that struggle with mental health issues, feel alone, and don't have a way to really an outlet to talk about what they're going through. So I think on multiple levels, this group is powerful in that way.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's one of the few Facebook groups I've been a part of in general, and definitely one of the few that I've been a part of with as many people as is involved, where it just always seems positive. It just always seems supportive, no
Right.
matter what people are going through. People have, generally very positive, supportive things to say, and that's a really special thing. I think it's a special kind of community, and so I'm really grateful to be a part of it. Um, so speaking of that community, we should hop on over to the Facebook page and see if there are any comments
Okay.
in the chat. Not quite sure how to do this, so I'll do my best to try and figure it out. Doesn't look like we've got anything that I can see. Um, but again, this is my first time doing this. So if there is
It's all
anybody
good.
and there are any questions or folks would like to ask Johnathon questions about either his chapter or just about fatherhood. Johnathon, you have the right fatherhood at 40. Maybe folks want to hear more about that. Now would be a time, and maybe since we don't have anything, Johnathon, if you want to maybe just share a little bit of information about how people can stay connected with you, if they want to find you on social media or a website, now might be
Sure.
a good time to share that.
Yeah. So you can find me on Twitter at fatherhood40, FORTY. I'm also on Instagram, fatherhood at AT underscore 40. And I'm also on Facebook at fatherhood40. Somebody took fatherhood at 40, so I couldn't I couldn't get that one. So I'm fatherhood 40. But that's where I'm at. And my blog, the website is fatherhoodat40.net. And again, 40 is spelled out. So, I've been really fortunate to have a good reaction, good response to the blog. I was asked to be one of the dad spotlight readers at Dad 2.0. And I read a piece
Mm-hmm.
about my daughter's 5th birthday and what the significance of that was for me. And I just wrote a piece today about reflections of a Black father on the death of George Floyd. That's
Mm-hmm.
been getting a lot of response as well. So it helps just to have a platform and a channel to connect and really share stories. I really believe in the power of stories to connect people together. And probably it's probably more relevant now than when I launched the blog 3 years ago, just because of the time that we're
Mm-hmm.
in now. So I think if we can just talk to each other authentically and kind of break down a lot of perceived divisions, that can go a long way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a big believer in stories as well. And, it's another powerful part of the Fathering Together community is all the stories that get shared. And, I think that's a big part of why this book is so powerful. And a big part of why I really wanted to be a part of this book is because, it's a collection of dads just sharing their stories about fatherhood. And, I don't think that there are many platforms out there socially and broadly where dads just get an opportunity to tell their stories. And so, I'm really proud to be a part of this project because I think the world needs to hear those stories. I think there's a lot of wisdom and truth in the fatherhood adventure. There's a
Yeah.
lot of knowledge that gets gained from that journey, and the world needs to hear that. Kids need to hear that. Other dads need to hear that. So, Jonathan, I'm so glad that we got a chance to talk with you more tonight about your chapter. I'm so glad that you're a part of the book because I think your contribution is really important and really significant. And for those out there listening who are interested in the book and want to learn more, it's available as an ebook on basically any platform that offers ebooks. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple, you name it. The cost is $1.99, so basically we're giving this thing away. And again, the point is because we just want to get these stories in the hands of more dads. And so if you want more information, you can go to the Fathering Together website, which is www.fatheringtogether.org. And again, just want to give a big thanks to Jonathan Briggs for joining us tonight. And yeah, for more information, you can find him on all the social media at Fathering at 40. So thanks so much, Jonathan.
Thank you, Kyle. I really appreciate it. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Yeah. Bye.